some of those requirements are. So the requirement to get into PA school is a decent GPA. You also have to take the GRE. And the higher score you get on the GRE, the more competitive your application will be, okay? Now, something that is kind of unique about PA programs is the amount of prior healthcare experience that they require for most of their students. So with PA school, you need to have a bachelor's degree in order to get into a PA program. And also on average, they expect you to have about 3 years of healthcare experience before you enter the program. Now, this healthcare experience can be in a couple different forms, you know, EMT, CNA, lab assistant, something like that, something where you have actual healthcare experience taking care of patients, working with patients. It is quite a big requirement, right? 3 years. However, this experience can come while you are in school. It does not have to be, you know, after you finish school, then you do 3 years of experience. It can be combined or even before school, but they do expect you to have about 3 years of experience before entering a program, okay? So if PA is something that you're thinking about, you need to make sure that you are working on that prereq, okay? So for the pre-PA, you need to make sure that you've completed all those prerequisites like I talked about, get that clinical experience, take the GRE, and then you will apply to a PA program once your application is ready, once you feel like you have enough experience and you've got the scores and grades and things that you need, okay? So I'll talk a little bit about the PA program. The PA program, it's a master's program, so it typically takes about 2 years. There are some courses, programs that are a little bit accelerated, but on average, you should expect to see about, you know, 20 months to 24 months for a program. Throughout that, you will be having lectures, you'll be having different lab experiences, and you'll be having exams, okay? And then at the end, you will also begin to have clinical application, where you will work in hospitals and things like that to gain some clinical experience. Now, at the end of that 2-year program, you will earn a Master's of Physician Assistant Practice. So that's an MPAP degree, okay? After you have received that degree, then you can take your license and certification exams. So you have to pass the Physician Assistant National Certifying Examination. And this is going to test you on clinical skills and knowledge. Once you've passed that, then you are a licensed physician's assistant and you are able to work. All right. Now, physician assistants can go into just about any field of medicine that you can think of. There is a role for physician assistants there. So if you love surgery, you can do surgery as a PA. If you love, you know, primary care, family medicine, you can do that. If you love sports medicine, you can do that. Dermatology, you can do that. So there's a lot that you can do with a physician assistant degree. And the average salary range for a physician assistant is about 90,000 to 130,000. Okay, so that's the general course of the PA programs that you'll see and what you can kind of expect in that career path. So again, I'll just remind you, if you have any questions about this, please send it into the chat or remember it so that I can answer that towards the end. All right. Now, the next path that we are going to be discussing is nursing. Now, nursing is a huge and varied field, and there are lots of different pathways that you can take to become a nurse. So educational requirements vary for each, and it depends on kind of what your ultimate goals are on which path you should pursue. Okay, so I'm going to first talk about certified nurses aid. So those are CNAs. So CNAs, what you need to do in order to become a CNA is have a high school diploma. And then it's a 4 to 16 week prep program that you take, and then you have to pass your CNA certification exam. And once you do that, you can work as a CNA. So this is something that you could do now and work as a CNA while in school or, you know, over the summers or whatever, like whatever, if you wanted to use this to further a different path in medicine, or if you wanted to work as a CNA, you could start that right now, okay? So again, it's that 4 to 16 week program and then a certification test. Now, so what does a CNA do? This varies kind of institution to institution with what they're going to have their CNAs do. Some allow their CNAs to do a little bit more, some a little bit less. Sometimes you'll have very specific duties as a CNA, so it kind of varies by institution. But in general, CNAs are going to care for patients at their bedside. All right, you're going to take basic vital signs like pulse, blood pressure, things like that. You are going to help with the transport of patients, perform hygiene tasks for these patients. And so a lot work in adult care homes and hospitals and other locations like that. And CNAs typically earn a salary of somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000 a year. Okay, so there's also the path of becoming a certified nurse's aide with a home health aide certification. So this is basically you're a CNA and you can do everything that a CNA can do. However, you also get an additional certification that is the home health aide. And this enables you to go into people's home, help them, plan nutritional meals to keep them healthy, help them perform daily tasks safely, and just provide compassionate and emotional support to people at home. So that is an additional certification that you can get on top of the CNA that'll enable you to do that. All right, so those two kind of go together. The HHA certification is about a 2 to 3 week program, and then you get the certification. Okay, so the next one that we will discuss, and this is again all under the subcategory of nurse, is a licensed practical nurse, or an LPN. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of LPNs, and their responsibilities are slightly different than an RN, which is a registered nurse. So LPNs, or the licensed practical nurses, they are able and certified to perform emergency CPR. In some institutions, they're able to distribute medication and vaccinations. They're able to care for patients at the bedside, patients on ventilators and things like that. They're also able to provide feedings through gastrostomy tubes, and they can also supervise CNAs and things like that. Okay, so a licensed practical nurse can do more than a CNA. They're able to be more hands-on. They're able to do things like CPR, and they're able to, distribute medications. The path to become an LPN is, again, you have to have a high school diploma, and then you enter a licensed practical nurse program. That is an 8 to 12-month program that it kind of varies state by state, after which you will receive your certification and you can work as a licensed practical nurse. Now, the average salary range for a licensed practical nurse is about $40,000 to $65,000 a year. And a registered nurse, now this is what we typically think of for the most part when we think of a nurse, is it's a registered nurse. So a registered nurse, their duties are similar to that of an LPN and a CNA. They're able to do everything that those two nurses can do. However, they're also able to administer more medications, provide some treatments to patients. They're much more involved in coordination of the care, collecting histories on patients, performing more bedside assistance. They can also perform diagnostic tests and also analyze some of the results. And they perform patient education and help patients manage their illnesses after treatment. So the registered nurses can do everything that the other nurses can do, plus quite a bit more. And there are several different paths to become a registered nurse. And it kind of depends on which state you're in for what path you can take, and also depends on kind of your goals, what you want out of becoming a nurse, because each one has slightly different things that they can do and different paths that they can go into, okay? So just to become a registered nurse, you need to graduate high school, so have your diploma or a GED, and then you'll go through about a year program, after which you can become a registered nurse. Okay, another path that you can take is to become a registered nurse with an associate's degree in nursing. So that's an ADN. Through this path, you perform a 3-year associate's degree in nursing. So after you've gone through that, you do this, and I'm not sure if the University of Tennessee has a nursing program or not. But the pathway for that is through like an undergraduate university, where you would then become a nurse through an associate's degree, after which you could practice. All right. The third way that you can do this is through a registered nurse with a BSN, which a BSN is a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. So this is similar to the ADN, except it's going to be a 4-year bachelor's degree in nursing. As you're going to be most competitive with a bachelor's degree in nursing, and least competitive just as an RN that went through a certified program. But all of these are viable options to get a job as an RN within nursing. And the average salary range is about $60,000 to $100,000 a year for nurses. Okay. So you can see if you do want to become a nurse, there are lots of different pathways you can take to get there. There are different types of nurses that you can become in overall nursing. It is an excellent field to go into if you want to take care of patients. Now, aside from becoming all of the different types of nurses that we've talked about, there are also advanced practice registered nurses, so APRNs. Now, these are nurses who then pursue further education, such as acquiring a master's in nursing or a doctorate of nursing. And so if you are going to go after these paths, it would be most advantageous for you to go through the BSN route if you want to pursue further education as a nurse. All right, now the different types of APRNs, you can be a nurse practitioner, which is something a lot of us have heard of, right? So that's how you become a nurse practitioner. It's either a master's or a doctorate degree. You can be a clinical nurse specialist, a certified nurse anesthetist. Wow, that was hard for me to say. Or a certified nurse midwife. Okay, so these are all further education paths for nurses. And the further education you have, the more relative salary you'll have as well. And you'll have a lot more that you're able to do as a nurse. As a nurse practitioner, you can do a lot more than as an RN, and as a nurse anesthetist, you can do more than as an RN. And so furthering education enables you to do more in medicine. So if you are interested in this, know that there are lots of different paths and kind of plan out what it is that you want your end goal to be, and then pick the path that makes the most sense to get there. Okay, let's talk dentistry. So dentistry in many ways is similar to medicine in the path. So right now, if any of you are interested in dentistry, what you can be doing is maintaining your GPA. Keeping up a high GPA will be very helpful for you. Planning on completing your prerequisites. And again, talking with your advisors. Your advisors are like such an underutilized resource that I encourage all of you to go in, talk with them, or I don't know, you're probably not doing in-person meetings now, but Zoom in with them or something like that, whatever the protocol is right now. But get their help because they can be a lifesaver for helping you plan out and know exactly what you need to do for your specific situation. And then in order to become a dentist, or to get into dental school, you have to take the DAT and then apply. So the pre-dental path is 3 years of undergraduate where you complete all of your prerequisite classes, such as like, biology, chemistry, all those. Also, you need to be volunteering and shadowing to get that experience. And if you can get work as well in the dental field, that will also make you a more competitive applicant. And then you have to take the DAT. Now, most students take the DAT after their junior year. So you do 3 years of undergrad, then you take the DAT, then you finish out your 4th year of undergrad. And at that point, while you're doing your 4th year, you apply to dental schools, you interview, and then you get accepted. So that's the typical pathway. All right. Here I've got some average GPAs and DAT scores so that you can kind of see. For the more competitive ones, you're going to need a higher GPA. However, don't worry if your GPA isn't a 3.9. That doesn't mean that you can't become a dentist, or it doesn't mean you can't go into medicine. these are just for kind of the top programs. But you can see that you need to have a relatively good GPA and a decently high DAT score. Now, as far as dental school goes, dental school is typically 4 years. So your first 2 years of dental school are going to be your preclinical years. This is where you are attending lectures, you're doing labs, you're practicing your hand skills, and you are really learning everything that you need to learn from books to be a dentist. Now, your third and fourth year is where you will have your clinical clerkship. And this is where you'll go into, the hospitals, the school that you're at, whatever situation they have set up for you, and you will actually begin performing dental procedures. It'll be hands-on training under supervision of your teachers and of other dentists. And by the end of that 4 years, there are certain requirements that you have to pass off. And once you have completed all of those, then you will be able to receive your degree, either a doctor of dental medicine, a DDM, or a doctor of dental surgery, depending on what path you take, which would be a DDS. And then you can go and be a practicing dentist. There is no residency mandatory after your dental degree. So after school, after the 4 years of school, you can go and practice as a dentist. If you do want to specialize within the dental field, it requires additional certification and licensure. And so if you want to become an orthodontist, a prosthodontist, an oral surgeon, things like that, that is going to require a residency where you receive further training and then further certification. And that will enable you to pursue those more specialized fields within dentistry. Okay. There are many paths in dentistry, though, that require less certification and schooling to become a part of. So becoming a dental assistant or a dental hygienist are other options that you have to be a part of the dental field without being a dentist. So there are many paths to get involved in the dental field. Now, the average salary range for dentists is anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000 a year. Okay, pharmacy. Now, I have to say, I have an immense respect for pharmacists. Like I said, I just finished my second year of medical school, and we learned about a lot of medications. But what we learned about was not even a drop in the bucket to what these guys learned about in pharmacy school. And I am just impressed with them. They're amazing. So a good pharmacist is a lifesaver for doctors, for dentists, for nurses, for the patients. They're amazing. So I have great respect for the pharmacy field. So if any of you are interested in pharmacy, what you can be doing now is similar to what we've talked about before: maintaining your GPA, planning when you're going to do your prerequisites, talking with your advisors. Again, talk to them. I'm telling you, if that's the only thing you get out of this, I'll be happy. Talk to your advisors. They can help you so much. And then prepare for the pharmacy college admissions test, which is the PCAT. And then you also need to gain pharmacy school application letters of recommendation and things like that you should be thinking about as you're going through your undergraduate. Okay, so typically with pre-pharm, you'll complete all of your prerequisites during your first 3 years. Then you'll take the PCAT. Again, the higher you score, the more competitive you'll be. And then your 4th year, you apply to pharmacy school, and then you'd interview and get accepted. So pharmacy schools, they vary a little bit between 3 and 4 years, during which there will be lectures, labs, exams that you'll go through, and at which time you will earn a doctorate of pharmacy. So it'll be a PharmD is the degree that you would earn. After that, you have residency, and it'd be 1 to 2 years of clinical training. Now this is, or research, or research. Now this is where you'll receive your specialty training, such as if you are a pharmacist that is like a general pharmacist, an internal medicine pharmacist, a geriatric pharmacist, where you can kind of specialize within that field during this hands-on residency period. After your residency, then you will need to take the North American pharmacist licensure exam. And also, if you want to perform in other states, then multi-state pharmacy jurisprudence exam. Okay, so you'll need to get your license and certification after your residency, and then you can work as a licensed pharmacist. And there are lots of different roles as a pharmacist. There are lots of different things, different places that you can work, different things that you can do. So don't think of a pharmacist just as the person at your local Kroger, right? That is a pharmacist there. That's not the only thing that you can do. There are lots of things that you can do with pharmacy. And the average salary for a pharmacist is between $120,000 and $150,000. Okay, now we've arrived to medicine. Now, medicine is the love of my heart. It's something that I'm very passionate about and that I've loved for a long time. So at this point, I'm going to walk you through kind of the path for how you get into medical school, what you can be doing now to get there. And I'm going to go into more depth than we did with the other ones because I know a lot more about medicine. And here at Blueprint, there's a lot that we can help you do if you are interested in medicine. So let's start with what the difference is between a doctor of medicine and a doctor of osteopathic medicine. So an MD versus a DO. This is something that actually I wasn't too familiar with until I was considering where I wanted to go to medical school. It's not something I thought a lot about, and now maybe I should have. Maybe I'm an exception, and most people know like the specific differences, but I did not. So I'm here to share with you kind of what the differences are between an MD and a DO. So a doctor of medicine is kind of the traditional physician and surgeons who practice medicine that focus on treating illnesses and disease and things like that. Okay, so just your traditional physician that treats illnesses using medicine. Okay, doctor of osteopathic medicine is very similar, but slightly different. Okay, osteopathic physicians use all conventional methods of diagnosis for treatment, so they're a little bit more open into what they'll use to arrive at a diagnosis and a treatment. However, they are trained in a specific emphasis on achievement of normal body mechanics through manipulation of the musculoskeletal system. Okay, so DOs are more open to different paths to diagnosis, different methods for diagnosis, and treatment they view a little bit more holistically and focus on achieving normal body mechanics through manipulation of the musculoskeletal path. Okay, so it's slightly different. A doctor of medicine is more traditional, and a doctor of osteopathic is more holistic. Okay. So MDs and DO programs have very, very similar requirements when it comes to education. To get into either, you need a high GPA and you need a good MCAT score. One of the big differences in application, though, is if you are interested in becoming a DO, you are going to need more hands-on experience. Or sorry, you're going to receive more hands-on experience of like training in the musculoskeletal system as opposed to if you pursued an MD approach. Okay. So, all right, let's talk pathway. And then we're going to talk about kind of MCAT, GPA, things like that. All right. So we are going to be going through your pre-med journey, starting with what you should consider, and then the timeline. We're going to go through a more traditional timeline, but I'll also share with you some non-traditional timelines. My pathway is slightly non-traditional, but I'll share that with you in a moment. Okay. So I'm just going to share with you the broad strokes right now, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail. So traditionally, what most students do who are pursuing medicine will complete 3 years of undergraduate, during which time they will complete all the prerequisites that are required, as well as getting extracurricular activities, volunteering, working, scribing, shadowing, things like that. At some point during their junior year, they'll take the MCAT. And then during their 4th year, they will apply to medical schools, interview, and get accepted. That is the traditional way. However, there is also the option of taking a gap year or gap years, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay. Now, once you're into medicine, into medical school, your first 2 years are going to be your preclinical years. This is what I just slaved through. All right. It's where you're going to be doing lots of lectures, lots of book work, lots of studying, memorizing, and you'll be taking lots of examinations. This is where you learn everything that you need to learn in order to get into the hospital and start treating people. All right. After your first 2 years of medical school, you'll take your step 1 of your licensing exam. After which, for most programs, after which you will start your 3rd and 4th year. Some schools are a little bit different where they have you take your step exam after your 3rd year, but generally it's after your 2nd year. That is actually what I'm studying for right now. I'm preparing to take my step exam. After you've completed that, you'll start your 3rd and 4th year. And now this is where you will be rotating around hospitals. It's called your clinical clerkship, and you will get hands-on training in a bunch of different specialties, a bunch of different fields of medicine under the supervision of other physicians or residents. Okay. During this time, you'll have the opportunity to be exposed to a bunch of different fields of medicine. So it is okay if you are interested in medicine, but you don't know exactly what specialty you want to go into. That is okay. That is normal, actually. It's more abnormal to know for sure what you want to do before you actually get into medical school and start learning more in depth about it. I still don't know what I want to do exactly within medicine. So if that's kind of the situation that you're in, it's okay. It really is okay if you don't know exactly what you want to do, but you know that medicine interests you. Now, after you've completed your 3rd and 4th year, you will have residency, and it doesn't matter what specialty you go into. If you want to be a family doctor, you need to go to residency. If you want to be a surgeon, you need to go to residency. All right. Now, the specific residency will differ depending on what specialty, but all physicians who come out of medical school will need to go and do a residency. So residency is anywhere from 3 to 7 years of specialty training, after which time you will take specific board exams that will enable you to practice that specific specialty of medicine. Now, after residency, you can then work as a practicing physician. And if that's as far as you want to take your education, that's perfectly acceptable. That is the point at which you can start truly practicing medicine. However, if you want to further your education and become even more specialized, you can pursue a fellowship. And depending on what specialty you pursued initially with your residency will determine what fellowships are available to you. But there are so many different paths that you can take in medicine. There are so many niches within the medical field that you can find that to fit whatever your interests are. So look at all those paths when you're considering what kind of medicine you want to perform. Okay. Now, the typical salary range of a doctor is on the low end, anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000, $150,000 to $250,000. The more specialized you are in general, the higher the salary. So some specialties, the average is as high as $500,000 on average, and it can range quite a bit within there. Okay, now let's talk about average GPA and MCAT scores. All right, so again, these are top tier schools with an average GPA of a 3.9, a 3.92, 3.85. Sorry, excuse me. These are the top tier schools. If you don't have a 3.94, it's okay. That doesn't mean you're not going to get into medical school. There are many medical schools within the nation, and you do have to have a decent GPA, higher than, I would say higher than a 3.6 or a 3.6. If you're higher than a 3.6, you can still be pretty competitive. If you're lower than a 3.6, it's still possible to get into medical school, okay? However, maybe you would consider doing a postdoc to increase your GPA. But anyway, don't stress if you don't have a 3.9 GPA. Remember that this is just the median here, that half of students who actually get into Harvard actually have lower than a 3.9 too. And half of them have an MCAT lower than a 519. Okay. So remember that. But this is kind of how it stacks up for the top tier schools. For some of the mid-tier schools, you're looking at more of like a 3.82 or a 3.75 and an MCAT of like a 5.10 or something like that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your pre-med journey. Now, I would like to hear from you guys. How many of you are freshmen? If you are a freshman, give me a shout out in the chat so that I can see. All right, doesn't look like we have any freshmen here. That's okay. What about sophomores? Any sophomores? All right, we've got a sophomore. Any juniors? All right, we've got at least one junior. And what about seniors? Do we have any seniors? All right, sweet. So we've got sophomore, juniors, and seniors here today. We're also recording it, so there may be some freshmen who watch this later. So I'll go over this, but I'll go over it a little bit more quickly. So I'm going to go over what to do your freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, and then actually when you begin med school. All right, so let's start with freshman year. Now, these are some things that don't just apply to your freshman year. These are some big principles that I want to talk to you all about if you are interested in medicine, because these are big points that you should really consider. So first of all, if you are a freshman, don't start studying for the MCAT, okay? You don't need to do that. Studying for the MCAT longer does not necessarily mean that you're going to score higher, okay? Length of study does not necessarily correlate with an increased score. You need to study smart, and you need to study hard when you do study, but you don't need to study for years or even for months on end, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit about how to study here in a bit, but don't start studying for the MCAT just yet. The same goes for sophomores, okay? You sophomores, don't start studying for the MCAT yet. And many of you juniors, don't start studying for the MCAT just yet, okay? Come up with a plan before you start studying. Study smart, because if you study for too long, you're much more likely to get burned out. And if you get burned out, you're not going to score as well. So don't feel like you need to be studying right now. There are other ways to prepare for the MCAT that you can be doing right now that I will talk to you about. All right, another plug for this. I know I've said it multiple times, but talk to your school advisors. They can help you immensely. They can help you know what you should be doing right now for your specific circumstance. They can help you know what to do for how to strengthen your application, who you can reach out to get shadowing experience, to get other experiences that you need to get into medical school. They can be your best friend for getting into medical school. So please, please, please meet with them. Even if you think you know what you're doing, still find time to meet with these wonderful people because they can really help you. All right, so what you can be doing your freshman year and your sophomore year, and if you're starting your junior year or partway through it, start planning your prerequisite courses, okay? Make sure that you take those prereqs, your chemistry, your physics, your biology, all right? Make sure you have all of those prereqs down and taken care of before you take the MCAT. That is how you can be studying for the MCAT right now. Knock out those prereq courses. In addition, start developing good time management habits. Your grades matter, right? Your GPA is going to partially compose your competitiveness when you're applying for medical school or whatever program you're applying to, but make sure that you form good time management habits. This is the time to play around, see what works for you. Don't just study to pass the exam, study to learn the material. If you learn the material now, it's going to benefit you so much more when you go take the MCAT and when you're actually in medical school. If you just try and pass the exam and you cram and forget everything that you learned, that was a waste. So develop good time management habits now and good study skills now, because those will follow you through into medical school or whatever other field you're going into. And it will be a great benefit to you when you get there, because then you won't have to figure it out when you're there. All right. Also, for you freshmen who may be watching, start thinking about extracurriculars that you want to get involved in. Think about your interests. Think about something that you can get involved in that will help you stand out from other people, something that you feel passionately about. For you sophomores, we're going to get to you in a minute on what you can continue doing. But also your freshman year, start building good relationships with your professors. You're going to need them to write good letters of recommendation for you. And so if you can start building a good relationship right from the get-go, you'll have lots of wonderful options to ask for letters of recommendation, and that would be happy to give them to you. All right. So now your sophomore year, maintain your GPA, keep that GPA up, keep up with those extracurricular activities that you started planning your freshman year, or if you hadn't started doing them, start. You need to start soon, okay? Now, during your sophomore year, this is where you should start thinking about, okay, when do I want to take the MCAT? What am I going to do to study for the MCAT? And you should be pretty specific with this. Think about and research how long do you think it's going to take you to study. I'll share some thoughts with you on what to do with that in a moment. But think about, okay, what date range am I going to have to study? And if I have this time to study, then when am I going to want to take the exam? All right, start thinking about what resources you're going to be using. Resources are incredibly important when you're preparing. You can't just study old class notes and expect to be able to perform well on the MCAT if you're only study for a little amount of time, okay? While old class notes are great and then could be a great resource to you as a supplement, they shouldn't necessarily be your mainstay. There are lots of excellent resources out there. Blueprint has excellent resources. There are also other great resources out there that you can use, but start thinking about what you want to use, what materials to help you review, what materials you want to use to help you practice, okay? Start looking at those. Also at this time, you can begin looking up AMCAS requirements for each school. You can look at what the specific prereqs are for certain schools. There are general prerequisites that you need to get into med school, but there are some schools that require additional prerequisites, like to apply to Harvard, you need to have done calculus, right? That's a prereq to go to Harvard. So if you want to apply to Harvard, you need to make sure you take pre-calculus, or not pre-calculus, sorry, you need to take calculus. And high school calculus doesn't count. It has to be in college. If you don't want to go to Harvard or any school that doesn't require calculus, you don't have to take calculus, okay? So begin to look up AMCAS specific requirements for each school. It's going to tell you what classes are required for that specific school, and it's also going to give you the specifics on the letters of recommendation that are required. Some schools will only let you send in 3. You can only send in 3 letters of recommendation, and it has to be 2 science and 1 non-science or something like that, right? Or 1 science, 1 community, and 1 character reference, you know, something like that. So there are going to be requirements for each school on what they expect from those letters of recommendation, and that will be detailed by AMCAS. Some schools will require you to send in at least 4 and up to 10. So just be on the lookout for that and start thinking about who you would like to ask to get those letters of recommendations. Okay, junior year. Now, junior year is where you're ultimately going to decide, am I going to go for this? Am I going to try and get into an MD program, a DO program, or am I going to go for a post-bac? The reason that you would go for a post-bac is, number 1, if you are interested in pursuing more in undergraduate, okay? If there are things that you wanted to learn that you didn't, or specific classes, you know, you could consider taking a post-bac. However, most people who are going into medicine, the reason why they do a post-bac is to increase their GPA. Doing a master's program will not affect your undergraduate GPA, and medical schools will not look at that. They will not incorporate that into the GPA that they're looking at. So if you want to increase your GPA, doing a postbac can do that. That is how you can boost up your GPA if your GPA is a little bit low. All right. This is another time where you're going to want to check in with your advisors or any mentors that you have. And this is the year typically that people take the MCAT. Now I'm going to talk you through the traditional path. This is the traditional path. Okay. There's also the option of taking it after your senior year, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So your junior year is the year that you would take the MCAT. It's the year that you'd ask for letters of recommendation. It's the year that you compile a list of schools, that you begin writing a personal statement, and that you then send out your application. All right. That is all things that you would do during your junior year, which takes some people a little bit off guard because they think that that's stuff you do your senior year, but it's not. It's stuff that you do throughout your junior year or towards the end of your junior year. Okay, so when should you take the MCAT? It depends on you. It depends on whether you want to study while you are in school or if you want to study after you finished school. There are many different options, many different choices, and it depends on when you want to start medical school, okay? This is where I'm going to talk now about taking a gap year. Many students take a gap year. A gap year is just what it sounds like. It's a year, it's a year between when you graduate from undergraduate until you start medical school. Now, there are many reasons why people take a gap year. But ultimately, if you do take a gap year, you should not just do nothing during your gap year, okay? You should be building your application. A lot of people take a gap year specifically to build their application because they don't feel like they got involved in enough extracurriculars, or they didn't do enough research, or they didn't do whatever. And so they take a gap year and they work on those specific weaknesses in their application, and then they do the application process and then get into med school, okay? So that's definitely an option. If that's the case, you can take the MCAT during your senior year instead of during your junior year. You can get your letters of recommendation your senior year and do all this stuff later. Now, if you feel like you need more than 1 year, again, that's okay. Taking a 2-year gap is fine. It depends on your life situation and your goals. Just know that schools in general, they do not look down on you taking a gap year. Many schools actually like to see people take a gap year because they get some real life experience and not just college life experience, which is different. Okay, so if you want to take a gap year, it's not going to hurt you. If you don't take a gap year, it's not going to hurt you. Okay, so it's whatever works best for your situation. So that's kind of the path that you take in order to get into med school. Now, I want to stop here just for a second and take any questions that you have. So let's see, how many people do we have? Okay, so if you want, you can turn on your mic and ask your question. There aren't too many of you here right now, so it should be fine to manage that. Or if you'd prefer, you can just throw it into the chat box and I'd be happy to answer it. But I do want to stop here for just a couple of minutes to answer any questions that might have come up. All right, I've got a question. Where can we access the recordings of this meeting? Would one of the advisors, would you want to fill that question for me?
We will post it to our YouTube page. And so if you go to YouTube, you can search the Center for Career Development and Academic Exploration, and you'll be able to find it there. You can also access it from our website, career.utk.edu, in our video library. But give us like next week before we get all the videos from Pre-Health Prep Week up.
Perfect. Thank you, Kritisha. All right, any other questions that you have? All right, so I've got a question here. If I was trying to go to medical school in 2022, when would I need to take the MCAT? Okay, good question. So starting medical school in 2022 means that you would start in July or August of 2022. All right. which means that you would need to be accepted to that medical school by March. Now, okay, this is kind of a loose date here, but by March of 2022. That can kind of flip-flop around if you're put on a wait list or something like that. That means that you need to be accepted the beginning of 2022. So when would you need to apply then? It would be in the previous summer. So it would be this summer, this June specifically, that would give you the best chance. If you wanted to go to medical school, you need to apply this June. All right, which means that you would want to take the MCAT with enough time to get your score back before you actually apply. That is ideally. So at the latest, I would recommend that you take it in the beginning of May. That would be the latest I would recommend you take it if you're trying to start medical school 2022. All right. It is definitely possible to prepare for the MCAT in that time. And I'll share my experience with you. But are there any other questions that I can answer at this time? Okay. So I'm going to share with you really quickly my experience with taking the MCAT. I am a bit non-traditional because I was married and had a kid during undergraduate. And I was working 2 jobs while I was going to school full-time because that was the only way that I could put food on the table. So I was working a lot and I was studying a lot, and I did not have time to study for the MCAT as well. There wasn't enough time in the day for me to get that done. And so I knew that I would not be able to take the MCAT right after I finished a semester or during a semester because I wouldn't be able to study. And so my plan was to, after I finished a semester, I was able to get 1 month off, three and a half, 4 weeks off from my 2 jobs, where they let me study. I told them my situation, that I needed to study for the exam, and they were both understanding, and they let me get the time off. So I had 1 month off right after I finished a semester. So basically for the month of May, I studied. And I studied hard. I studied like 12 hours a day for that month. Then at the end of that month, I took the MCAT, and I felt good about it. I felt that I'd been progressing really well. And so I think I took my test on like it was like the 24th of May or something like that. And applications opened June 1st. And so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go for it this year. It was not in my plan before. I was planning on waiting a whole nother year before I actually applied because I just didn't think that I was going to have enough time. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and apply this cycle. And so I worked on my personal statement right after that. As I started prepping for the MCAT, I had been asking for letters of recommendation. So I had already gotten my letters of recommendation. But I prepared my personal statement, prepared all of my activities and events and things like that. And that took me a little bit longer than I had thought. And so I didn't actually submit my application until the end of June. It was like June 26th or something like that I submitted my application. By that time, I had actually gotten my score back. And so I knew, oh no, I hadn't gotten my score back. No, I hadn't. It had taken 6 weeks. Yeah, I hadn't gotten my score back yet. So I just applied to one school. Because after you need to submit your application, and then you need to give AMCAS or the AAMC time to verify your application, which takes about 6 weeks to do. Now, after they verify your application, that's the point where they send it out to all the schools that you applied to. So it's not an instant thing. They need to verify it, which means that during that time while they're verifying it, you can add specific information to your application after it's been submitted. One of those things is a test score. So when I filled out my application and actually submitted my application, I did not have my test score. I did not know what I scored on the MCAT. But I felt that I did pretty well on it. And so that led me to try and apply. Now, I just picked one school that was kind of in the lower range of schools that I thought that I would be competitive for. That way I could get my application going. Once I got my score back, I was able then to add as many schools as I wanted to apply after that. So if you are in a similar situation where you are applying to medical school before you're getting your score back, begin that and just apply to one school. Once you find out what score you got and you know where you'll be more competitive for, then you can add more schools and it won't delay your application at all, okay? So there's a little trick for you. If you do, the person who asked about when's the latest I would recommend taking the MCAT, if you do need to take it a little bit later, you can do that. It's a little bit more risky though, because you might just waste the money of that application if you didn't score as well as you expected or needed to. But I ended up sending my application out towards the end of June. Now, how these applications work for medical school is on a rolling admission basis, which means that schools fill up as they go throughout the year, which means the earlier that you apply, the more likely you are to get in. I scored a 521 on the MCAT. I had a 399 GPA, and I had decent activities and shadowing experiences and things like that. I only got offered 2 interviews. And I got offered those 2 interviews. I went to those 2 interviews and then ultimately I did get accepted into medical school. But I got several letters from schools that said, sorry, we're rejecting your application because of all the other applications we've received. We weren't able to look at it. And so I had a lot of schools that didn't even look at my application because I had submitted so late. Now, the end of June didn't seem late to me, but in reality, it is late. So when you guys apply to medical school, apply as early as you can to give you the maximal chance to get in. I was lucky that I got in. People who submit in July and August have a very, very slim chance of getting in, even if they have amazing scores, amazing grades, and amazing experiences, just because of how the rolling admission process works. So apply early, all right? Now, I did only study for 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, but that is not what I would recommend you do. That was, I don't know how I did that. That was a miracle. Typically, you need longer than that to study. So I would recommend that you plan on taking anywhere from 2 to 3 months to study if you're going to be studying full time, and extend that a little bit longer if you're going to be studying during school, okay? But that's how long you should, on average, plan on studying. So at least 2 months full time to 3 months full time, or if you're going to be doing it during school, maybe up to 6 months, but never longer than 6 months. Okay. So that's what I would recommend based on my experience and on what I've seen tutoring. I have seen zero benefit from students that I've had that have studied longer than 6 months. Ultimately, their scores start going down and it's just not worth it. So don't ever study longer than 6 months at a time for the MCAT. Keep it shorter and try and do it as focused as you can. You get a lot more done if you just have 2 months where you're just solely focusing on the MCAT, you know, where you're studying 50 hours a week or something like that, than if you take 4 months where you're studying 25 hours a week, right? Ultimately, it adds up to the same number of hours, but you're going to be much more prepared in the 2 month span of time where you were solely focused on it. So take that for what it's worth. That may not be an option for you where you can solely focus on it, but if it is, I'd recommend it. Okay. Any other questions for me before we move on to talking more about the MCAT specifics? And if there's not, that's totally fine. Okay, I'll move on. Okay, so I'm just gonna give you a quick overview of the MCAT for those of you who may not be super familiar with it. So the MCAT is the Medical College Admissions Test. It is a multiple choice exam, which is a relief to a lot of people. It is a computer-based, so you're gonna need to go to a testing center to take this exam, and it's a standardized exam. It's developed by the AAMC. There are 4 different sections. There is the Chemical and Physical Foundations. There's the Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills section, the Biological and Biochemical Foundations of Living Systems, and the Psychological, Social, and Biological Foundations of Behaviors section. So those 4 sections, okay? For the science sections, which are the Chem and Phys section, the Bio-Biochem, and the Psych-Soc section, those 3, those are considered the science sections, all right? There are 10 passages. These passages will each have about 4 to 7 questions associated with them, as well as 15 discrete questions. So a discrete question is just a standalone question that isn't associated with a passage that you use for multiple questions, okay? So you'll have 10 passages with 4 to 7 questions each, and about 15 discretes for the science passages. For the CARS, which is the Critical Analysis Reasoning Skills section, which is that second section, there are 9 passages, no discretes. So there are just going to be 9 passages of 4 to 7 questions each. Now, this CARS section is very different than anything that you've done before. And a lot of things, I've seen a lot of students. I've tutored dozens and dozens and dozens of students. Everyone who thought that they would be good at CARS and so they didn't need to practice ultimately ended up needing to practice CARS quite a bit. So just because you've always been good at reading or whatever the case may be, don't underestimate the CARS section. You need to practice it. Now, you may get a handle on it quickly, but do not neglect it, okay? Because it is a challenging section. Now, the length of the exam, it's total exam where you're answering question time is about 6 hours and 15 minutes, okay? But how long it'll take you to actually take the test is eight hours, okay? Because you're gonna have some breaks. Between each section, you're gonna have a 10-minute break, except between the CARS section and the Bio-Biochem section, you'll have a 30-minute break where you can eat. So the total time, it's about 8 hours. In reality, it's more like 7.5 hours, not including check-in time and things like that. So this is a very long exam. It's a very exhausting exam. And you need to take practice tests, okay? That is gonna be one of the biggest things that you guys can do to prepare is take practice tests. Now, something that scares a lot of students, there is no calculator provided and there is math, okay? There is math and there is no calculator, but it's okay. It's not too challenging. They make it decently easy on you. You will have access to a periodic table, and you will have the option to review, mark questions, strike through, highlight, all of that, okay? So that's a general overview of the MCAT. Here on the right, you can see the breakdown where you'll have 95 minutes with 59 questions for the sciences, right? 10-minute break, which is optional. You don't have to take the full 10-minute break, but I think that you would be silly not to. And then CARS is a little bit shorter at 90 minutes. All right. Now, at the end of the exam, you can void your exam. All right. Only do this if you feel like you really flopped the exam, okay? Don't do it out of nerves, but you can void the exam afterwards and it won't be graded. It won't count against you. Okay. So here we're going to talk through kind of the ideal timeline that I kind of already discussed, as well as what is possible. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about primary applications, secondary applications, and interviews. All right. So when you should take the exam, the ideal time is somewhere between September of your junior year to May of your junior year. It takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to get your exam scores back. So plan accordingly. Primary applications, you can submit them beginning usually like May 31st or June 1st. But the primary application actually opens for when you can start filling it out towards the middle of May, okay? So ideally, that is when you would take the MCAT. Now, if you're taking a gap year, just switch junior out for senior year and then senior year for gap year, all right? Now, your primary application, this is going to be your personal statement and your a description of all of the activities that you were involved with, as well as your transcript that you actually have to provide an electronic copy of from your school, but you also have to fill out manually, okay? So filling out your primary application does take a bit of time. You need to devote adequate amount of time to your personal statement. I've spoken with lots of people on the admissions council for different schools, and they weigh your personal statement very heavily. That's what has them look further in to your application, okay? So don't plan on knocking out your primary statement in a day or two, all right? It's gonna take refining. You want this to be the best thing you have ever written in your life, okay? Reach out to as many resources as you can to help you refine and hone your primary application. And talk with your advisors about what schools are looking for in your in your personal statement, okay? So utilize those resources as you're doing your personal statement in your primary application. So ideally, you would submit it as soon as you can in June, all right? You can submit it up through the end of July and still have an okay chance of getting in. You can still submit your application all the way up to December. It's possible. It's highly unlikely that you will get in though, the further you delay. So if you can, get it in the beginning of June. Now, once you have submitted your primary application, it will need to be verified. Once it is verified, then they'll send it out to all the schools. Once the schools get it, they will send you a secondary application. And the secondary application is an additional application that you'll fill out for each school that has additional essays that you'll write on different topics. You should plan on turning around these secondary applications in about a week to 2 weeks at the most. So turning around these secondary applications is going to take up a big part of your summer if you apply to a lot of schools especially, and you'll want to turn those around as fast as you can. Now, interviews will start in about September. So that is when they'll first begin extending interviews. And the sooner you submit your application, the more likely you're going to have an early interview. And if you have an early interview, you're more likely to get in because there will be more spots available, okay? The interviews can range anywhere from September all the way through January, and even some, I've heard of people getting, some of my friends got interviews in February, okay? So if you haven't got an interview in September or by November, it's okay, don't freak out. There's still quite a few months left of interviewing where they'll extend interviews to you. Now the rolling admissions, schools start admitting people in October. Some do it and they let you know along the way. Many schools wait until March before they actually tell you that you're in, okay? So some schools will tell you along the way. Ohio State, I found out like Thanksgiving weekend that I had gotten in to Ohio State, which was awesome. And then I'm like, I know I'm going to medical school, and then it wasn't that bad of a stress. But I know many of my friends who applied and many of my students who have applied, they did not find out until March. And then they heard from all the schools at once, whether they got in or not, okay? So if you haven't heard anything by March, don't freak out. It doesn't mean you haven't gotten in. And then there's this kind of the scuffle afterwards where you get put on a waiting list, and then somebody is put on a waiting list and a spot opens up, so they leave the school that they were at and then you get into the school. So it's this whole shifting thing around that continues to shift up until school actually starts. So one of my classmates, they got into Ohio State University like July 29th, and our school started on the 3rd of August. They got the offer July 29th, and they were like, all right, I'll start school in 3 days or 4 days. So it can happen that late because of this whole shuffling, right? Okay, so that's what you can basically expect to see as far as timeline goes, and a really quick overview of the actual MCAT. So the MCAT is a big deal. It is a big determinant in what school you'll be able to get into, or if you'll be able to get into a school. It's not the only factor that plays a role in that, but it is a big one. And so I'm going to tell you now how Blueprint can help you get into the school that you want and get into medical school. So Blueprint has one of the best, if not the best, MCAT prep course available. They completely redesigned our system just about a year ago. And let me tell you, it's phenomenal. It's amazing. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So what sets us apart at Blueprint? A big thing that you get when you use Blueprint is accountability. One of the hardest things about studying for the MCAT is staying accountable. You know, you say that you're going to do something, but then, you know, TikTok videos distract you, and, you know, you get sucked up on Instagram or things like that, and you end up not doing what you say you're going to do. Accountability makes you own up for that, and it helps you to do better in the future. Now, it may feel uncomfortable at the time when you have to own up and be like, oh yeah, I didn't do what I said I was going to do, but it will help you do better next time. All right. Accountability is a huge aspect of making sure that you stay on track for preparing for the MCAT. And so we have live accountability. We have live instructors that will keep you on track. They'll help you manage your study plan as you go along with unique class sessions. They're designed to keep you engaged. It's easy to arrange your schedule and rearrange as needed as life happens. But you get to take these classes as often as you want until you feel ready, because things happen, you know, life gets in the way. And so with our class system, you are able to have ultimate flexibility and stay accountable. So let's talk about now the flexibility of Blueprint Online. So there is one platform that you will use that integrates all of the top of the line resources that we have into one powerful program. All right. You will have a study organizer, a study planner that will plan everything out for you. You can set out like, okay, I can't study this day. This is how many hours I'm going to study a week. This is when I'm going to take the test. And you can fill out all this information, and then it will give you a study planner that will help you stay organized, know what to do, when to do it. And it integrates all of your resources into one location. It is a huge time saver because you don't have to plan out what you're going to do when, which can be one of the most stressful things about preparing for the exam. In addition, you can move your schedule around as needed. It has amazing flexibility. You just drag and drop different courses, different modules that you'd be doing. So it's very flexible to fit your individual needs. Whoa, why is it going backwards? Okay, in our classes, you will have two live instructors, two MCAT instructors who scored 99th percentile or above on the MCAT, who will be teaching you. These are not boring one-person lectures kind of like this, where I just drone on and on and on and talk, right? But it's an actual class with two experts that facilitate discussion. So it'll be a big group discussion on camera, engaging, back and forth discussion, designed to really keep you engaged and help you to learn. In addition, there is a very unique class structure where it has you practice, test-like practice continually throughout your program, and getting help from live instructors as you do these practices that you won't get anywhere else, that will really help you to excel on the MCAT and to make progress quickly. So with our class, you will have 40+ hours of live instruction. So there's 16 lessons in each class, like course period. Each of them are 2.5 hours each. And like I said, you can take this as many times as you want. There will be 2 MCAT instructors who will be live and on camera. And it will be more, like I was saying, a discussion. It'll be a conversation about topics rather than just a lecture. Here is a link and I can drop this in the chat afterwards, to some free resources, and I'll talk more about that in a bit too. So here's an example, this picture here, of what a class will look like. You'll have two instructors where you'll be going through questions, they'll be taking polls. You can raise your hand, ask questions, you can type them out in the chat box. But it is really focused on applying what you're learning. You don't just study a topic, but then you actually have to apply it in these classes, which is how you really learn. As I mentioned before, there's unlimited class rescheduling and retaking. You can really learn at your own pace. So there are 160 modules that are like 10 minutes long, 10 to 15 minutes long, that you can move and do at your own pace as you need to. There are integrated quizzes with every single module to help you apply what you're learning. In addition, there are those live sessions to also help you apply and talk through what you've learned in test-like conditions. In addition to your classes, there are also unlimited office hours 5 days a week, where it will be there will be live, where it will be about deep content review about specific questions you have. You go with a question and you ask it, and they will walk you through specifically and help you find answers to that question. Sometimes they will have topic-specific ones where they're like, we're going to be talking about fluids from physics in this office hour today. In addition to them being offered 5 days a week, they are recorded, so you can watch them, and there's a whole host of them that are already banked. So if you are struggling with a specific topic, you can actually watch a pre-recorded office hour on that content. There are highly engaging videos in these modules. It's not like reading a boring textbook. It has great illustrations and animations, and I already mentioned that customizable study plan. Now, this is a feature that I love about it. All right, so here's that drag and drop thing that I was telling you about, how you can just move your schedule around as you need to. You can also reschedule, restructure your study plan as often as you need to. Okay. In addition, something that I love is it's mobile friendly. You can do all of this on your phone. You can adjust, you can see your planner, you can watch the videos, take the quizzes, all from your phone or your iPad or your laptop. You can take it with you wherever you go, so you really don't have any excuse not to study. And currently, we are the only truly customizable study planner tool that really adapts to your schedule in real time, where you can be like, hey, I had something come up on Saturday, so I need to move these things around. And you can do it. It's really easy. Here's an example of some of the video animations that we have of like, this is of glucose transporters. So it's not just a boring PowerPoint that you have to follow through and struggle to stay awake, but it is really visually engaging. Now, this actually is by far my favorite aspect, and to me, the most important aspect of what we offer at Blueprint. In order to do well on the exam, in order to do well in medical school, you need to identify your strengths and your weaknesses. You need to identify what you don't know, things that you're doing, certain thought patterns, you know, notice certain patterns that are leading you to choose wrong answer choices or not think about something correctly, or certain content that are giving you issues. You need to recognize what those are and then address them. That's how you get better. That requires hours and hours of analyzing tests that you've taken. And with Blueprint and its analytic tools, that takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. It'll tell you specifically by topic how many you got right. It'll tell you by like learning principle, you know, whether you have a tendency to switch from the right answer to the wrong answer or the wrong answer to the right answer. It shows you by difficulty level, by questioning type, by reasoning skill, by subject, all of these analytics, so you know exactly where your weaknesses are and you can address them. I kid you not, this will save you so much time when you are prepping for the exam and help you to focus in on where you're weak so that your score will shoot up and you're not going to plateau. This, to me, is the best feature that we offer, and in and of itself is worth so much because of how it will affect your score. And it really helps you maximize that without wasting your time guessing. because the faster you spot the patterns, the quicker you'll be able to fix them and the faster you'll progress. So we have this new program. All of our teachers are, as I mentioned before, in the 99th percentile or above. There are over 160 different learning modules. We have that adaptable study planner, the live review sessions. We have MCAT books if that's something that you want to. And it also includes access to all of the AAMC online resources. It's totally mobile friendly. We have over 4,000 questions in our Q bank and those powerful analytics that I was talking about before. So ultimately, you get everything that you need to really crush the MCAT so that your MCAT score is not something you're worried about holding you back from getting into medical school. Our practice exams are the best, aside from the AAMC, right? Who are the ones that actually write the exams. To level with you and be quite honest, I did not take the next step, or it was next step back in my day, but the Blueprint test course or a prep course. I didn't take it. I just used their practice exams. I actually used a bunch of different practice exams from a bunch of different companies. And after I had actually done the MCAT, I realized that Blueprint's tests were by far the closest and most accurate to the actual MCAT. And so I looked into their company a little bit, and that's actually when I applied for a job and started looking at working for Blueprint. I only looked at working for Blueprint. They were the only company I was interested in working for because of how much they focus on the individual, but also on how representative their material was. I was very impressed with them. And so that's actually why I reached out to them to begin working for them. They continually update, our IT team continually updates this to represent changes in the AAMC. And most of our students score within 1 or 2 points on the actual MCAT of what you're scoring on our Blueprint exams. So, big takeaways that I want you to take today. Number 1, talk to your school advisors, okay? That's a big one. Talk to them, they can help you. Number 2, apply early. Apply beginning of June. That is gonna help you, all right? Number 3, take practice exams as a way to study and identify your weaknesses, focus on those and addressing those and overcoming those so that you can progress in your score. That's going to be the most helpful thing you can do. All right. Those are 3 big things. Here's the 4th thing that I want you to take away from this. Go get the free MCAT practice bundle. It is totally free. Okay. It includes a half-length MCAT diagnostic and a full-length MCAT diagnostic. You get content review videos, you get access to that customizable study plan, and a lot more, okay? There are no obligations. You just sign up for this. You can just search blueprint.com prep free MCAT bundle, and it'll give it to you, all right? You just sign up for an account, and you get access to all those things. It's free, and you literally get 2 practice exams and content review videos. Like, it is an absolute win. Then you can see if you actually like Blueprint's stuff, if you like their material. And if you do, then you have the option to get more. And if you don't have to. But this is an excellent resource for you. And I encourage all of you to go and do this. Do it today. All right. Sign up for this free bundle. And we already talked about that. So I'd like to open up the time to any questions if we have any time remaining.
Dylan, would you be open to sharing maybe contact information if they had any questions after the presentation today?
Of course. Yeah, I will throw that into the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you to the students who were able to join us today live, and for those of you who will be watching the video after the fact. For those who are here in person, I have, or rather I'm dropping into the chat the resources for today. And so you'll be able to see that there. And for those who are watching this video after the fact, they'll be posted in the comments below. But thank you so much to Dylan and to Blueprint, and thank you all for coming today. And we'll look out for you for the rest of our pre-health prep week event.